So one of the things that I've been asked about applying their NLP skills to the business context is that if you've been on a more conventional practitioner program, or even ones that are supposed to be business orientated, I'm finding many people are simply not aware of your responsibility. Whether you're internal within the organization and you want to start using your skills when you're facilitating a meeting or you're coaching someone in a skill, or you've assembled a problem-solving group and you're going to be leading it, or you're external, you're acting as a consultant, as a training consultant, as a facilitator, as a problem solver, as an executive coach, or whatever, is that the context within which you will be working tells you an awful lot about what you do, how you do it, and what you don't do. That's a hint. Is that making sense? In other words, that how they do things and how politics works in the organization and who is screwing who, metaphorically and or physically, can have a profound influence on how you create plans and how you work. If you are working external to the organization, here's something that you absolutely must be aware of, and that is you have a limited amount of time in which you will be effective as an agent of change before the organization itself, the structure of the organization, its inertia as a structure, absorbs you. This is before the Borg takes you over. We are the Borg. We are about to assimilate you into our collective. Yeah? You have a limited amount of time before the people that you work with, the people who hire you, the ones you hang out with, the ones that you're talking to, their points of view, their ideas, their certainties, they start to seep into your own mind and your own perceptual understanding of how things work. And then you're seeing the world as they see it, and you are no longer of real use to them because you've been institutionalized. Ground control to Major Tom. Floating off in space. Yeah? What? I've been working with a client for a year, and I'm still not Yeah, you are. Boy. It's because you stop asking. You stop asking the daring questions. You stop asking the questions that come from outside of the map or model of the world, but are completely relevant to what's going on and completely relevant to what seems to be the main obstacle to things moving forward. Why? Because as soon as you ask that, you will start stepping on toes. You'll start stepping on, political issues. Things don't happen just by accident. Somebody somewhere is getting paid. Somebody somewhere is gaining value from what's going on. And even if that value seems to be negative in your eyes or from some senior position's eyes, the not being called upon, not being accounted, being able to sit out. This whole thing about working from home. Yeah, no wonder a lot of people don't want to go back. Suddenly you're in everybody's eye. And right there are some people who are dreading it because they didn't like their job very much. Anyway, inside the organization, there will be the way we do things around here. And it's usually unarticulated, but it's that how we do things around here, the unconscious of the organization, if you want to call it that. The ways and means, the who talks to whom and whom you don't talk to and what isn't brought up, what we're not allowed to talk about. It's like family. It's like family therapy sometimes. I tell you, in some organizations, working with the board was like working with a dysfunctional family. You know what I'm talking about as well. Some of you have worked in these organizations where it's like you're in a crazy fucking family and there's war going on and you got brothers attacking each other and getting in each other's way. And then there are sisters who just go, no, everything's great. Everything's fine. I don't see anything. Yeah, etc., etc. Try looking at your organization like a family. Yeah, and understand that families play Monopoly. You know the game Monopoly? Shock of my life when I started to wake up started to hit the planet as an entity in my early 20s. And my family, we played Monopoly all the time. What is the purpose of Monopoly? What do you do in Monopoly? What is your job? It's to bankrupt the rest of your family and take them out of the game. Now that's teaching good old American values, don't you think? Hey, there's a UK version. There's versions for all over the world now where we can teach people that the most important thing you can do is bankrupt your brother and force him out of the game. Sorry. All of these rules and these games and these patterns, they affect how we work together and what questions can be asked and what can't be asked. So what you're going to have to do within your organization in terms of where you are, in terms of how long you've been there, in terms of who you mix with and whom you don't mix with, in terms of who you would consider to be an ally and whom you wouldn't, all of those things need to be sorted out and reconsidered. In some organizations I've worked in, there have been incredibly powerful PAs. Incredibly powerful, not because of who they were working for, but because of how many favors they'd done across the organization. How many people they had actually kind of, moved forward and facilitated and helped. When I wanted somebody who had power in the organization, I didn't go to her boss. I went to her. She was the one holding the reins of power. So it's getting that sense of how the politics works. Anytime you think there's a no, anytime you think that there's an absolute blockage, understand that you're wrong. Just plain wrong. But what you have there is a deeply ingrained set of payoffs and game rules and agreements that have been made. You don't bring up my shit, I won't bring up yours. Don't step on my toes, I won't step on yours. Step on my shit, I'm going to ruin yours, etc., etc. And by the way, that's corporate language. I love that. And you're using profanity. No. You haven't worked in organizations. You haven't worked at that level. As soon as people aren't watching or looking, the communication often degenerates. And it becomes quite coarse, quite vulgar. People think that the civil service is there to serve the needs of a stable government and looking after the people. No, it doesn't. It looks after itself. These assumptions that we make, the axioms that we hold about how things work and what they are major blockages to our being effective as change agents. The assumption that an organization does what it calls itself, or that there's a relationship between our mission, vision, value statement and what actually happens in the organization. The labels are not the things. NLP 101, presuppositions of NLP, the map is not the territory. It's not just a nice little phrase. It's the law of the universe. It's part of the magic and programming ability of language itself. Language is the program. The words and the labels cannot encompass all the different aspects of living relationships, much less the possibilities for how objects are used. The implications in terms of problem solving and in terms of when you walk into an organization for the first time or into a team for the first time and you're given a brief and you have to understand that the brief that you are given has nothing to do with what's going on and everything to do with how people are talking to themselves, the kind of language that's being used, the kind of manner in which the situation is not being resolved. If you've been with me for any length of time, you know that the first thing we have to do is we have to make sure that the problem statement is gone from impossible into possible. When you're in the corporate environment, the number of times you're going to be presented with, whether this is a small project and that you're on as a team member or working as a consultant from the outside, where the brief you are given not only has nothing to do with what's going on, but is not possible given the current structure of the organization or given the current politics or given the, I've seen this one a million times, which is, receiving a tender document that says we would like a world-class, deluxe, A1 program that can stand head-to-head with the best-in-class all over the world. How much do you have? What can you do for £50? Yeah? It's like, it's like going shopping. It's like going shopping at Tiffany's and not bringing a credit card. Yeah? You're just not set up as a customer. Yeah? Somebody wastes their time producing a document full of guff, and they don't have the budget to deliver this thing, which says that either there's a screw loose somewhere in whatever the department is, usually HR, but it could be any department. Shh, keep HR away from operation. Just keep them away. Everything's going fine. We don't want to mess it. I've heard these things over and over and over again. Right? No. No HR. And then there's some fantastic HR. The rules, how we do things around here. The politics. And then the crazy. I'm serious. I've had these tender documents full of stuff like I just talked about. And there's no way in hell. They've got a fantasy of a solution, but they haven't even correctly identified. In that organization, the problem was that instead of all of the different departments and teams inside one tent pissing out on the competitors, they were all inside the tent with the flaps closed, all pissing at each other. That was a little more than family therapy for that one, by the way. I mean, it was criminal. The stuff I was witnessing was criminal. Also understood why there were some certain kinds of news headlines about bribery and criminality related to this client company. Once I was in there, I could understand why, because it's how they did business. It's how they treated each other. There were people who were destroying each other's projects internally. That's what you're facing. If you don't know where you are, if you don't know the structures of how things are working and how choices, do you know where the power is? Do you know who makes the decisions and who looks like they make decisions but doesn't? It's not just who can find some money for you. So it's learning not just about group dynamics, but about how power works in organization and how to map the kind of influence and authority within the organization. These things are necessary if you're going to be effective at bigger projects. At smaller projects, the tools that you have will be okay. You can work into them. But there, you need more guidance. This was where, for the first 5 years in business, I had mentors. I had one consistently through that period and had him I had him for more than 10 years, up until he retired. But other mentors as well. And this is where having someone who has that experience and knowledge can help you to move faster. With some of my clients, they're in quite senior positions, but they managed to get through on merit, but then had reached the stage where they were suddenly hitting politics. And they didn't realize that the reason why they weren't going any further was that they hadn't greased the right people, that they hadn't created relationships with the right people, and they were being blocked. They were being blocked by recommendations of lesser people with less skill, less experience, and all the rest of that. Why? Politics. Why? Because they weren't paying attention. Why? Because they were presenting themselves as an obstacle to some panjandrum's desires and goals. How do you deal with that? In a very straightforward and simple manner. And that's where applying the tools and the skill sets in NLP comes in. But you have to know where to do it. You have to know what to do. This is, as I've said before we can talk about strategies, before we can talk about suggestion, you have to know what it is you're suggesting. In other words, what it is you want to have happen. And in some cases, what the process is. You need some of that information in there. That can come from experience, and it can also come from a good mentor. This is the stuff that you do not get in your average NLP training. And it's not a flaw and it's not a fault. And even in some of the trainings that are calling themselves business trainings, if those people do not have the experience to back it up, if they haven't been in the room, if they haven't been facilitating, if they haven't been advising on strategy, if they haven't been coaching at that level, coaching senior people, coaching the senior executives and board members, they simply do not have the references, the resource references, in order to bring them into play. Not a flaw, but it is going to affect what they communicate to people. Yeah? So, we all have holes in our buckets, every single one of us, and we will be working on them and fixing them for the rest of our lives and careers. Those who tend to go further are those who make this just a part of how they move through the world. Yeah? You study, you grow, you develop, and you get better and better. It's well worth it because the NLP toolset, as I've said before on many occasions, it's now part of the operating system rather than some special technique that gets pulled out and that smells like some kind of a tricky thing. It's one of the coolest possibilities that we have, and you have to work with it. You have to work on it. It's a discipline, and that discipline makes you better in all areas of your life. If you haven't gotten the discipline yet, I would invite you to join because it's easy, it's fun, it doesn't take a lot of time. It does take consistency. Anyway, that's what we're here for.